From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How did Joelle?
My shoes got wet on the way to work, so my feet are a little bit damp and cold.
Oh, you're on the bus again today, were you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't really rain a lot in Perth, so I wouldn't imagine you have too much wet weather gear.
I have snow gear from like when I've had snow-based holidays, but it's probably a little bit overboard for Perth.
Yeah. It rained. Yeah, people in Perth forget how to drive when it rains too. It took me, half an hour to get into work on a normal 15-minute drive. So yeah.
Yeah. My husband did school drop off this morning, which he called me afterwards, and it was a bit of a nightmare by the sounds of it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very unique in Perth. People are like, what is this thing falling from the sky?
Yes.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, so wet feet, did you don't have a spare pair of shoes here at work?
I actually do, but I don't have a spare pair of socks, and the socks is more of the problem for me right now. So.
Yeah, okay. I'll have to just get the ceramic heater going under there.
Yeah, I think so. I'll just take my shoes off and warm my toes in front of the heater.
Nice. Now, we had Andrew Barrett in the office last night.
We did.
Yeah, for a networking and a bit of a talk from Andrew, sharing. That was really good. I know you love networking.
Jason's incorrect, listeners. I do not love networking.
It was funny because Baz said, I want to give you a hug. I'm like, ooh, don't know about that.
I'm okay being hugged. It's just that you're scared of me, that's all.
Yeah, I just don't want to get that close. This is, for those watching on the video, this is probably about as close as I get. So just because that's still, she's like a T-Rex, so she can't really. Short arms.
My arms are proportional to the rest of me.
So tiny, is what you're saying. Like a T-Rex.
No, a T-Rex's arms are disproportionately tiny.
Yeah, but they are still tiny.
Well, I don't know the actual dimensions of a T-Rex's arms, so
we'll Google it after the call today. But hey, we do have.
We'll let you know, listeners, on the
in the show notes.
The comparison.
Put in the show notes.
My arms versus a T-Rex arms.
Yeah, definitely.
This is the important stuff that people want to know about.
Absolutely. But let's introduce our guest in because he's patiently waiting while we waffle on. So he is a chartered health and safety professional working at the intersection of safety and technology. He has worked as both a WHS professional and a technologist in high-risk industries globally. He wears many hats, including founder of the Safety Innovation Academy, Safety Innovation Lead for the Australian Robotics and Automation Precinct, and CEO of Pocketknife Group. Welcome to the podcast, Cameron Stevens.
Thanks, guys. I'm wearing Ugg boots, keep my feet warm.
Yeah, I often wear Ugg boots around the office, much to Brendan's disgust.
And I mean, it doesn't look out of place on public transport in Perth either, wearing Ugg boots.
They're not really rainproof though.
No.
I'm actually wearing Ugg moccasins, not Ugg boots.
Oh.
So, controversy.
What is that, like it doesn't have the back part of it, like it's more like a slipper, is that?
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a crimping around the toe for a bit of... I'm a hipster, so,
Yeah,
I feel like you're missing your trick. I want it up my leg. I'd like more of a boot. Yeah.
I've got the boot as well. That's for deeper into winter.
Okay.
I feel like Dan would be down with some Ugg moccasins.
Yeah, if Burks did Ugg type stuff, he would wear
Dan's just been rocking the Burks lately, so I feel like he'd be into that as well.
He'd probably switch over soon, yeah. But hey, Cam, really great to have you on. I know a lot of our listeners will know you because you're quite vocal on LinkedIn and you share a lot, particularly around that intersection of safety and technology. And congratulations too on starting or officially going out on your own. I know it's been a bit of a side hustle for a while, but now you're full hog into it. So congratulations.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
So before we get into the more professional stuff, we like to ask all of our guests what podcasts they like to listen to.
I'm not much of a podcast listener. I must confess I've only listened to one episode of the Psych Health and Safety podcast, and it was the one on tech, on the one on the one about where you're talking about your app. But there is one that I listen to, and it influences some of the things I do, which is Thriving on Overload by Ross Dawson. So he's an Aussie futurist based over in the East Coast, and he basically interviews people to look at how they, in a world of such, so much information, how do they make sense of that and turn those knowledge insights into action? So I find it fascinating, and he's a great interviewer, and everything's very actionable. So I find that important in a podcast. I've done a few interviews myself recently where I've even gone, gosh, I don't even think I would want to listen to that, even though it was me on the podcast, just because I think, if you're going to invest time in listening and you're trying to get something out of it, it should be really actionable. So that's what I like about that podcast.
Cool. Well, sometimes we're actionable and sometimes not so much.
Periodically, we're actionable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really up to the guest.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Our favourite podcast at the moment, The Rewatcher, is not actionable.
Well, no, but that's just entertainment.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good to listen to entertainment.
Rewatchables or?
No, it's a podcast called The Rewatcher, it's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer
Rewatch.
episode by episode. Kind of, they watch an episode and then they record a podcast about the episode.
Right. And Rewatchables is about movies that are entirely rewatchable. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So there's another podcast for you. That's a
Yeah.
really cool podcast. It goes over all of the classics and some really hilarious movies that they really get into why it was iconic and rewatchable.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd be up for that one.
We should get Luke onto that because Luke's the youngest person in our office, and he basically anything that happened before about 1998 he has no awareness of at all.
He hadn't heard of Mr. Squiggle.
That's the most recent one. He hasn't seen Happy Gilmore. There's just
Wow.
It's sad, really.
My 8-year-old, or almost to be 8-year-old daughter can recite many lines of Happy Gilmore.
Well done. Yeah, that's good fathering. Yeah.
You could look at that from either direction, really. It's either fantastic or awful, depending on your view of the movie, I guess.
I think it's fantastic, Cam. Well done.
It is an eminently quotable movie.
Yeah.
There you go.
So this will probably be quite a lengthy answer. Tell us about your career background, please.
Yes, it can be quite lengthy. So I was a competitive athlete from the start. So according to my mother, I could roller skate before I could walk. And when I was 2.5, I won the national championships for roller skating.
What?
Yeah, neck level.
How does that happen?
It was,
Yeah, Cam. Like when you opened up, I'm like, I met you, Cam. Like you
2.5.
You're about the same size as Joelle, so I thought it might have been jockey, but roller skater.
Well, the trophy was about the same size as me, and it's still at least kind of waist height, because I am probably Joelle-esque in stature. So ever since the start, I was competitive in individual sports. So roller skating, springboard and platform diving. I was in the Olympic squad for the 2000 Games. I was a competitive trampolinist. I was in the Institute of Sport for Gymnastics. So I was high performance individual sport, which I think shaped a lot of, the way that I am now, and a lot of the baggage that I have, a lot of the issues that I've got, but also some of the things that I shaped into the way that I do what I do. I got exposed to sports psychology quite early in the piece, particularly around competition performance and how to present yourself to the media and all of these other things, and being coached and then coaching others throughout that career, part of my career. Well, I consider it part of my career because I did get paid for it as well. And then I moved, because I was a competitive sports person, I didn't really pay that much attention to school because I was always training. And I broke both my ankles, or the talus bones, so the talardomes. I broke both of those in 1999, and I lost my scholarship and funding and my position or potential position in the 2000 Olympic Games, and that it flipped everything on its head, and it made me have to go, well, what am I going to do next? And I was in year 11 at high school by that time, and I realized I needed to probably focus a little bit more academically to figure out, what could I do with the rest of my life, given that all I thought about was what I was going to do from an individual competitive sports perspective. I was also, because of my injuries, I was exposed a lot to allied health practitioners and the psych side of things as well, and really trying to figure out, it was almost like a midlife crisis, but I was only not even finished high school, about what's next. But that really, and by doing that competitive sports, to travel to Japan, I was traveling to Europe, I was all over Australia, I was traveling all over the world, and it got me really excited about learning about culture and other people, and I was fascinated by all the different cultures and people that I got exposed to from around the world. So I was really interested in that. And when I finished high school, I thought I might want to get into medicine. And I failed the psychometric testing twice, and it really pissed me off because I found it really frustrating that some psychometric instrument could effectively block me from what I wanted to do. And I thought it was horrendous. And I still think psychometric testing really is a problem when it comes to pre-employment. And so I got really frustrated, and I just said, I'm out, I'm going. So I did a little bit of university, of some archaeology. I did 6 months archaeology and anthropology, learning about the world. And I thought, I want to Indiana Jones this stuff and get out of here and see it for myself. So off I went, and I traveled the world for the best part of 4 years or so, rode around South America and through India and Asia on motorbikes, and did all the risky stuff, and went around the world, got exposed to different things, and met a group or a couple of German sort of health freak people in northern Thailand. They were kind of like these body healing, Reiki, multidisciplinary health folks that they said to me, look, you're really intuitive when it comes to your body and to other people's needs, and why don't you think about doing something like allied health wise? And it really sparked my interest in thinking, okay, I'll go into that, and that was the lead into doing physio. So I did my physio degree, realized that I was a little bit more motivated by money than I was like motivated by money as well as motivated by helping people, and the physio just didn't fit the bill. So I figured out, how can I make a little bit more money but also do things that help people? And I got exposed to the insurance industry where, managing injured workers, where there's a little bit more money to be had, but you're also trying to support and help people through their issues. So I started musculoskeletal problem solving, and I found a knack for complex problem solving with insurance claims that just weren't closing out. They weren't getting an outcome. A lot of psychosocial risk issues, or yellow flags we used to call it. And that got me fascinated in the design of work and how work impacts humans and their experience at work, and also how injured workers are or aren't accommodated in the workplace, and just how much work design impacted that. So I felt a little bit impostery about not knowing enough of the psychological side and how everything kind of worked. And I was a private school boy that was a springboard and platform diver that had never done a hard day's work in his life. So I needed to know more about work itself. Around this time, I proposed to I went to my now wife, my now late father-in-law, and I said to him, I would like to ask you if I could have your permission to marry your daughter. And he said, not until you've nailed a picture up onto the wall and you can weld and you can do all of these things because you know nothing of work. So he kind of put me through a bit of an apprenticeship on manual labor and what it is to actually, do things. So I found myself in a role funded by an insurer through local governments, and that got me exposed to a whole bunch of different workplaces and workplace challenges and risks. At the same time, I did my master's in human factors. So Jodie Oakman and Wendy McDonald, I think her name is, Wendy McDonald, they run the La Trobe University Masters. I don't know if they still do it now, but they did more than a decade ago when I did my master's. And that got me exposed to, so there's my master's in human factors, and I did, cognitive ergonomics, physical ergonomics, and system ergonomics. So looking at how psychosocial risk and physical risk and systems work together and how that impacts the humans at work. And it really set the trajectory for the rest of my career, just how I thought about, the role of the human in the workplace and how the design of work impacts their experience. So I did that for a while, got exposed to a whole bunch of different workplaces and how things, how work worked, and figured I want to impact really high risk issues. So I was like nuclear, oil and gas, things that could explode, multiple people could die, environment's going to get messed up. So where could I go? So I wrote to like every single nuclear, aviation, aerospace, oil and gas type company that I could find and said, I want to work for you. And I ended up getting into the oil and gas sector. So worked a good close to a decade almost in there, up the ranks as health and safety. That was the job title that I typically had. And I appreciate this is a really, really long story, but the thread here is when I was looking at the design of work in oil and gas sector, it was really fortunate because of the money that they had to spend and the risks that they're trying to mitigate. They were early adopters with technologies that were coming out. And I was early on just identifying how much technology shaped the design of work. And I felt it was my responsibility to be the voice of the worker in how that is impacting the experience of work. And it felt like there was no role in an organization that took that on. So it was like I was covert, wearing a health and safety hat, but somehow trying to influence the way that technology introduction into the business was shaping the experience of work. And again, imposter syndrome about not feeling I had enough technical knowledge. I felt the only way I could do that was get into a tech role myself and learn and immerse myself. So again, I called a whole bunch of different tech companies and said, surely you need some random skill set in your business that can do this. And of course, everybody said no. They didn't appreciate the role that I was trying to pitch to them. And fortuitously, long story short, I managed to get engaged and hired as an Android solution engineer for a head-mounted wearable computing company, not knowing the difference really between Android and iOS. So total bullshitting my way into it. And I did that for 2.5 years. It was really fun. I did about 200 tech deployments there, and then somehow became the head of augmented and virtual reality, or the managing director of augmented and virtual reality, or regional manager for Lenovo, the computing company. All the while, side hustling in the background, trying to do a whole bunch of different things under my own brand, just to keep excited and exposed to a whole bunch of different things. Exhale. Long story.
Very long story. I like weird background stories like that. When I say weird, I mean
Not traditional?
Not a linear progression.
I went to school and then I went to uni.
I did, I went to
working.
school and this is what I wanted to do, and so that's what I did at uni, and then I got the job that I always wanted while I was at uni, and now I've been there for my whole career. That's a boring backstory.
Yeah.
Yours is interesting.
I hope that if you're listening, you can see the thread. I feel like it's been quite congruent. There's a thread throughout there about being human and the role of the human in the way that we interact in the world, either socially or at work itself. So I feel like even though it's kind of a bizarre-ish background, it's not super linear. There's a linear thread in there somewhere. At least I try and tell myself that.
I think that there is, and I think probably the challenge was that there wasn't a profession associated with that particular linear thread that you were interested in pursuing, so you kind of had to create one for yourself as you went along.
Yeah. Guess so. Here I am anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue, right? Because your side hustle has now become your full-time job. So tell us about the Pocketknife Group.
Well, given the backstory, and maybe you fast forwarded through it, or at least listen to it on double speed. Please do that. The Pocketknife Group by design is trying to leverage all of that experience. So multi-tool background, being able to almost go to someone when you've got a complex problem to solve which has multidisciplinary requirements, but there's no chance that you're going to go and speak to an org psych, a technologist, a health and safety professional, a physio. You're not going to go and speak to all of these people individually. You come to me and I can triage you through to certain, I can either do stuff through the things that I can do, or it would be a little bit of a concierge to direct you somewhere else. There's also a little bit of a play there about, pocket knives. I think I love pocket knives in terms of their design. I think they're a super handy, well-designed tool. They've got multiple uses, but on work sites they're banned, which I think is hilarious because, we don't trust people to use a pocket knife because they might hurt themselves. And I just said that it was never meant to be an outwardly facing brand, and it sort of might not be in the future, but that's when I was thinking I just need to put a name together to get a proprietary limited happening. Pocket knife just came to mind. And the reason for it was we had some safety awards on an oil rig that I was working on, and I got all these branded pocket knives and handed them out, and then I was told that people weren't allowed to have pocket knives, so I had to take them back. And to me, it was just like this symbolic metaphor of the most ridiculous thing ever. So that's the backstory to the name of the Pocketknife Group. But in terms of what I do, again, I'm trying to use my multi-skill set background to solve complex problems at work. And ultimately, I'm focused on work design. So how do you improve the design of work through discovering and being more conscious of the problems that you're trying to solve and the dimensions of the problems you're trying to solve. So there's a variety of different things I do, mostly around trying to improve the digital literacy of the health and safety profession mostly, but also non-technical teams in businesses. That's through the Safety Innovation Academy, which is a sub-business of the Pocketknife Group. So I have a content creator in my team. Simon Crothers is from Behemoth Digital. He and I have partnered to create, use social media tactics and really impactful, well-branded, video-based content to translate knowledge across complex topics. And then I've got a variety of different advisory roles and then some bespoke consulting roles with complex problems from musculoskeletal risk management stuff, advising a psychosocial risk management tech startup, which is yet to be announced later in the year. I'm doing some stuff with Ansell and Teleforce on, which is a sensor-based technology for musculoskeletal risk at the wrist and hand. And yeah, a whole bunch of other things that I'm doing, some really creative and interesting stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And I know we're going to be doing something together through another person that we know. Too early to make an announcement on that, but yeah, interesting in participating in that endeavor with you.
It's already out there, I reckon.
Yeah, well, probably by the time this episode airs, but let's just not mention it just in case. So
I've already
got our announcement to make.
Yeah. But yeah,
it is hard actually keeping, one of the things I found in this work that I'm doing is the more creative and fun and complex and interesting the jobs are, the more everybody wants to protect the ability to share it. And I find that super frustrating. I know that this isn't the same with that announcement that we're going to, that company will make, but, the super interesting stuff that I'd love to share, NDA'd and confidentiality agreements and all this stuff. And it's really frustrating because I think there's such opportunity to learn. And we'll probably talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess as a health and safety professional working in the world of technology, do you see there's differences in perspective or mindset that you need to navigate?
I'll try to cut this short, which is not possible really because it's me and I talk a lot. Just reflecting on my own experience, and it comes back to that psychometric testing. I think as a safety professional, and if you've listened to me talk on if you've heard me speak in any other format before, you would hear that when I talk about technology to improve the design of work, I never talk about the gadget or tech for the sake of tech. I'll never actually talk about the tactic, the little bit. It's all about the trend that you're leveraging. But more importantly, it's the fact that when we work in health and safety, the mindset that is praised in the business is about our role in control, like controlling and constraining the outcomes of something new that's come to the business. So, when I was first trying to get drones offshore for flare boom tip inspections, the safety professional and the regulator, who kind of have the same mindset, were like, these are all the bad things that could go wrong with using a drone offshore. And there was never a balance, or the first reaction was never, wow, how good is that? Can you imagine not having to have people work at heights or be exposed to this really kind of quite hazardous and risky task? And can you imagine how amazing it would be if there was a way to do it without putting people in the line of fire, or to do it in a really kind of responsible and safe manner? We never think that way. We immediately go to what are all the bad things that can happen and what do we have to do to mitigate them? So it feels like we get praised, safety professionals in businesses, to just be that black hat, to be the thing, the person that talks about all the negative consequences. So there's a lot of negative connotations and talk, and it's always about what could go wrong, what could go bad. It's almost never what could go well and what's the opportunity. And the reason why it was so stark to me is, and I have said this story before a few times to others that might have heard it, is when my daughter was born, the first thing, you think a lot about the pregnancy and hoping that you're going to have that there's going to be a safe childbirth, and that but you don't think about what happens when you've got to get home and all of a sudden you've got to start parenting and figuring that out. And I really struggled when my daughter came home, because I was so worried about what was going to happen, negative things that could happen to her. Like, she could touch something sharp, or she could, hit her head and fall over, or we might not get the pillow right, or, something's going to go wrong. And all I could think about was the negative stuff, and it plagued me, and it was really quite intense, the feelings that I got around that. And it wasn't, my daughter was quite young when I moved full-time into technology, and in the technology space, the mindset is all about, and it's almost the complete opposite. It's like, let's fly to the moon, let's, rockets and spaceships, and we can do anything we like, and who cares about what goes wrong? It's almost the opposite, in a way. But I remember when I left, got out into the tech profession after being in safety for so long, there was this palpable, like a full-on transformational experience where I just felt totally relieved about the fact that I didn't have to think that way anymore, and it was really powerful for me. And now what I see is that if you can have a bit of a balance of that mindset, and I call it responsible innovation, where you've got a combination of looking at opportunity as well as control or mitigating unwanted consequences, then everything is better. Even at home, you can have risky experiences that are still responsible, and you can, because you need to do that to be creative. So, yeah, I think mindset, when I chat with safety professionals about doing things differently, not safety differently, but doing things more creatively, or applying curiosity, or using tech, and all these things could go wrong, trying to get out of that headspace.
Yeah, so I totally get it, because tech offers so many opportunities, but like you say, the mental models for health and safety professionals are typically going, well, let's do a risk assessment. What are all the things that could go wrong, right? Rather than going, what are the opportunities? And in fact, that's something that came up in the conversation with Baz last night. Actually going, well, rather than looking at worst case scenario, how do we be more appreciative and go, well, what's the best outcome that we can get out of this, rather than just trying to mitigate the negative outcomes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you approach it with health and safety professionals that may have been on that journey for too long, just looking out for risk and not looking at opportunities?
So there's a small portion that can't be helped. So we just let that go. There's detractors in every part of the, every area. So this very small portion of folks that just may come around later, but let's just forget about that portion, because they're a very, very small portion. I think common language and being really clear and purposeful with the words that you use around just making people feel more comfortable about this isn't overly complex, and just support people bringing back to basics. I wasn't successful early on because I was trying to go straight to the what's all of the possibilities that we could do, rather than what are the practical things we can do today. So getting right back to very simple practical activities. So and make people feel comfortable about that. So an example of the first practical activity I do with any organization that I work with, and I do this in my presentations, and again, for those of you that know me would have heard this several times over, is the first thing you could ever, like the simplest thing you can do if you want to get started exploring the intersection, or how work is being shaped in your organization by technology, is to know the name of your technology team and just go and have a coffee with them. And more importantly, you might even realize that you don't even have an internal tech team. It might be fully subcontracted. So it's a scary thought to know that you might have a mum and dad technology company fundamentally shaping the design and experience of your work, and not even realizing that they're doing that. And they're just getting on with purchasing laptops and issuing Office 365 licenses and doing all of these things. And there's not even a strategy around how that shapes the way work is experienced. So simply going, well, actually, I wouldn't mind going and have a coffee with that mum and dad company that are doing our tech roadmap for us, and understanding what's happening in their world, and how, whether they understand what we do in our business. And that is an activity that, isn't that hard to do. So coaching people through some of the questions they might ask is a different thing, but even just having that first interaction and building a relationship, and realizing that there's a role that people can play around how that interaction with technology is an example of where I start.
Yeah. Do you perceive any barriers for health and safety people wanting to do that, to engage with people working in technology?
Yeah, I imagine it's the same kind of barriers that you come up with all the time about, a health and safety professional doing things that are considered, psychological illness and injury, where, where's the role of the, the clin psych or the org psych and the role of the safety professional? Where's the role of the, whose role is it in an organization? Most businesses get really defensive and, they like to have a lot of ownership over their area, and they don't like other people kind of sticking their nose in. And traditionally, health and safety professionals have not been considered in the structure or the system of the business to have a role. So most of the behaviors will be, why the F are you in, like, sticking your nose in this business? go and get some hard hats and boots and go and put together the COVID spacing dots around, get back in your box kind of thing. So yeah, there's some significant challenges about that happening, particularly the more, tech forward businesses that just say, hey, we've got a whole organization set up to do this. Bugger off. Without a doubt.
Yeah. And I can imagine in certain industries it would be easier, right? Like you say, oil and gas, where they have made that investment in technology and they do have, major hazards that they have to control. Then health and safety might have more of a line of sight or be able to work more closely with the guys involved in the tech team. Some other industries, maybe like finance or something like that, maybe less able to have those conversations.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably, I don't think that's that true in a way, because I think there's a lot of bullying and a lot of bravado in, mining and oil and gas around, this is my area and, profanity here, see you later. I think there's a lot of, and because there's a lot of industry kudos about what these people are doing, it's like, well, we're doing fine, thanks, but out of it. So I'm not sure whether that's entirely true.
Yeah, but I often see there's more technology applications in sectors like mining and oil and gas where the technology is used to improve safety performance.
Yeah, that's not necessarily from the safety function though. Like that will be built into the sort of the safety and design concept. Yeah. So that's actually done through the engineering function rather than through the safety function.
Yeah, I would have thought there'd be some.
You'd think so, but not so much, no.
Yeah. Well, it's also,
that's my experience anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think we're seeing a shift more recently. Most organizations will have a pillar in their strategic vision, or they'll have a value of innovation. So now that we've kind of gotten away a little bit from the COVID murky mess that, kind of got people into day-to-day, head down, just get stuff done, people are emerging back out and anchoring onto those, that innovation pillar in almost all organizations that say, we need to be more innovative, and then away they go. So there are organizations that I work with that are leveraging that behavior in the organization, or that vision, to effectively say, okay, well, what can we do next? And there are some organizations that are doing things well, but generally speaking, most organizations are totally confused about how to move forward.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode.
So I think this probably moves moves us on to the work that you've been doing with the Australian Automation and Robotics Precinct. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so the Australian Automation and Robotics Precinct is a really interesting project. It's based in Perth, about 40 k's north in a place called Neerabup, and effectively it's a automation and robotics testbed, mainly for large format robotics, so mine automation and aerial survey drones. And I was up there with a solar robotics company, and I'm doing some stuff. Actually leaving in after we finish the podcast up to do some stuff today with another robotic piling, autonomous piling thing. So basically, it's an opportunity to test and understand the role and the way that automation and robotics is going to shape the future of work, mainly in the MET sector, so mining, engineering, technology sector. And I was engaged because, is it a mine or is it not a mine? Is it it's in a large city council. There's constraints and issues around that. There's risks and issues around geotechnical risk, and there's environmental impact. There's all sorts of things that need to be managed. But there's also this role of the human and the robot working together, and the role of automation in shaping the future of work. So they went out to sort of ask regular mine-style consultants to help shape their safety management system. And really the response was kind of, here's legislation, here's the things you've got to do, and it just didn't enable responsible innovation. There's a lot of startups that are trying to, push through and demonstrate their value to the business, but also mitigate risk at the same time. So there's this balance between opportunity and risk that needs to be done in a really creative way. So I was engaged to shape and iterate the management system. And so I was offered sort of the blank slate. There's literally a blank piece of dirt, and we've got roughly these activities, and do what you like. So my first activity there, so I've taken on the role as a little bit of a kind of like the health and safety professional, or the role that's going to be shaping that safety management system and all of the other parts of the management system together. And I'm going to be filming a lot of that for that collaboration thing that we're going to be announcing later, where I'll be showcasing to those that are confused about how to get started with innovation in safety. I'll be showing my thought process and what I've been doing, and the vendor selection, about the softwares that I'll be using and the technologies that I'll be using. But I felt that there was a significant opportunity through the design of the process, is that we could inject some of the typical issues that we get with contractor-subcontractor management is, that the psychological safety, the feeling that subcontractors can raise issues, that they have autonomy over their work design, so that we're not controlling and constraining the way they do things, but we've got checks and balances to make things done in a responsible way. Also wanting to do things like be really clear and transparent on data, so where data is flowing, how it's being managed from a privacy and ethics standpoint. So the first activity I've done in that is first thing I did before I took the job was to go up and do a connectivity assessment to find out, did I have an internet connection across the site? And only once that was established, to have a certain download, upload, and ping speed, was I comfortable to proceed, because I genuinely want to do something that's cutting edge here. So all of the data will be live in real time. All of the communication will be able to be performed in real time with visual context. So the next thing we did was a visioning exercise, where we wanted to be really clear about, that we trust our subcontracted workforce, that we're going to be very transparent and open around data, that we wanted to really demonstrate those values in everything that we do. We wanted to make all of the expectations very visual, so everything's 100% online, only paper if you need it from an accessibility standpoint. Everything will be translated in whatever language you want it to be in, with subtitles and with visual cues and different color schemes that are going to meet the requirements of these businesses. So I just wanted to demonstrate that, how we can do things and build some of the issues that typically lead to particularly psychosocial risk outcomes about transparency and trust and communication and all of those things I wanted to build into the design of the system. So yeah, hopefully you'll get to see some of that come out. There'll be a bit of there's some things that unfortunately you can't show just because of the non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality. But other than that, I want it to be a bit of an open book about learning how you can do things in a bit of a different way. So that's that role.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So the subcontractor relationship part of that, because that's always, I guess, a tension that I've observed anyway, in that, how as a client organisation, if you like, how much sort of centralised control do we want to have over the way that our subcontractors manage the work that they're doing, and recognising that there are sort of shared duties under the Act and those types of things as well. That kind of interrelates with almost your risk appetite as a business, and sort of how much you're willing to relinquish control to the expertise of the subcontractors that you're bringing on, versus, on the other hand, being more conservative about saying, no, we're the experts in everything and we're the experts in our business and we're going to tell you exactly how you need to do everything when you're on our site.
Yeah. So we don't relinquish control. We celebrate the fact that they're the subject matter expert. So they promote the safe way of doing things. We validate whether or not there's anything missing, and we fill the gaps where they wouldn't know. For example, they're not going to know whether there's an adjacent construction task that they were never going to know about that could impact their work. They're not going to know whether or not there's a drone in the airspace that may impact their radio frequencies or something like that. So we take that role, but we're very clear that we defer to subject matter expertise and celebrate that, raise that up. But more importantly, we then we try and almost productize that in a way. We package that up, and then we all the things that we learn from those organizations, and it's about how we engage immediately. It's like, we're here to learn from you so that we can be better as an industry, because all of us are trying to make robotics and automation a more responsible way of doing things in the future. So that's how we go about doing it. I'm very clear about the fact that we're not here to tell you specifically what to do unless it's required to make sure that you're informed about something, which is why everything's visual. So there's a far more ability to make sure everybody's on the same playing field, and we can have more diverse viewpoints in decision making, because things can be done remotely as well. We have people dialed in from Singapore to be able to give an assessment on whether or not they felt the terrain was appropriate for the vehicle, because we could dial them in live in the planning phase. We do full 3D visualization to determine how geospatially different hazards will interact with each other, so everybody's aware. And I think people feel far more comfortable, and people feel far more like what I've seen in the early experiences, people are extremely open to talk about their vulnerabilities and the things that they're concerned about. They don't hide them and just think that we're going to be concerned about it. So early days, but it's seeming to be quite a positive approach to doing things. So I'm really looking forward to sharing more about that.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more about having the right governance and assurance structures in place rather than sort of the control-based approach. Would that be?
Yeah, and it is an iterative process. So at the moment, there's limited activity, and it will become a hive of activity. So we'll shift the way that we have to support that over time. So that's also, generally speaking, in our businesses, we spend ages trying to come up with a governance strategy or a standard or a procedure. We embed it into the business, we pour concrete over it, and then we can never undo it. So that's the, we anticipate the fact that we need to be very agile, and we need to be very flexible to change. And the approach that we took 3 weeks ago has been iterated to what we're doing on this next job. So continually learning, but everybody gets a rapid feedback cycle, so everybody feels informed.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So I'm excited to see how all of that progresses, and what collectively we can learn from that that process and experience as well.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, Cam, I guess we both have a love of technology, and, we've been building the Flourish DX technology business for well over 5 years now. And for anyone who will listen, I'll tell them, really it is a data play. Like, we think by having good data, we can better understand psychosocial hazard exposure and resultant risks, and be able to, implement appropriate controls to reduce risk where possible. So I know you're interested in the space as well, and you've been doing some work in this space. Would you be willing to share some of the things you've been working on?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to psychosocial risk management, and also just understanding any problem that an organisation is facing, what we haven't done well is determined what data do we need to be able to make an informed decision about that risk or that issue. And really, nowadays, it's just a matter of understanding that data is not just... So data can be in photograph format, it can be a conversation, it can be a video, it could be a sensor, and that we need to spend time understanding the dimensions of the problem, so all of the different dimensions of the problem, and then determine, is there some form of data that we could get to formulate an opinion or some insight? And then in an ideal world would be, can we get that data in as close to real time as possible? So while that dynamic risk is playing out. So not latent data, which is but we do need, data sets that inform and that we can assess against. But ideally, we want to understand the dynamics of how a risk is forming in real time. And then from there, we need to make sure that data is pre-processed, stored, available, accessible in the right format for people to consume. So in terms of sort of tangible examples, what I've really been trying to get organisations to do is move away from checklist type data where you get a binary yes, no, tick in a box, or a like it scale of 1 to 5, to something far more visual or far more conversational. So I use a lot of conversational data, so recording voice files, listening to conversations or watching conversations play out, including body language, as well as video content, so video and voice. The introduction of a camera into the workplace itself is a really significant demonstration of trust and psychological safety in a business. So actually use that as an activity to determine the maturity of the ability to gain those levels of insight. But everything needs to be strategic, and we need to understand why we're doing it. And I'm trying to do that right upstream at the pre-employment sort of phase of when you first introduce someone into the business, getting them comfortable about the way that the workplace is going to behave around acquisition and usage of data.
Okay, so can we explore that a little bit more, the pre-employment work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I think, there's a lot of discussion about when we're looking particularly at psychosocial risk management, we look very much at the individual and what we can do at an individual level to try and, make that individual more resilient or behave in a different way or those kind of things. So that kind of starts at the pre-employment process, particularly organisations that do physical pre-employment. And when people go out and do a job task analysis, they'll go out there and they'll manually look at the way a worker interacts in the workplace, and you get these really templatized, individualized reports that don't make a lot of that don't offer any value realistically. I was really surprised because I stepped away from this space for for a decade, and I've come back and gone, wow, it's exactly what I used to do when I was almost 15 years ago now. And I was like, this needs to be disrupted. This has to change. So without going into significant specifics, what I'm trying, when a worker gets exposed to a job interview or to the workplace for the first time, there's a significant opportunity at that point in the whole job experience process to be able to mitigate some of the potential concerns around job control and autonomy and decision making and relationship and all that, and the way that you could fit in the organization by organizations that do a lot of hiring. So this is in the context of an organization that needs to hire lots of people, either for a project or for or they just have a lot of need for regular onboarding of people, is to do that in a cohort fashion where we bring people in together and get them to be doing a lot of sort of cognitive and physical shared collaborative tasks together in the process of onboarding. But there's also a lot of company branding and value and understanding of the work context in the onboarding process, so that people go, like, I can see myself here, I can feel myself here, I can understand the sorts of things that I'm going to need to be doing, so that they feel like they do or don't want to take the job. So it doesn't work for all workplaces, because not all workplaces have those dynamics, and it's not all workplaces can do it in that way. But there are certain workplaces where the status quo of individual physical and psychosocial risk assessment at pre-employment is done in a very linear, binary way, with no exposure to the work that's actually being performed, with no collaborative dynamics about how someone will actually work with another team member. From a cognitive load perspective, if they need to, and I'm doing a lot of work with people that are working with machines, so what that human-machine interface will be. So at the pre-employment phase, it's not doing a 3-minute step test. It's doing some, interaction with computer interface and time-based movement of information and knowledge transfer and using your brain. So people go, okay, so this is the type of thing that is going to be required of me in this business. I feel prepared or not prepared to do that. And there's some, follow-up processes that we're trying to figure out to nurture those people into a business and feel more comfortable. And then, trying to set up all of the things like return to work and these types of assessment methodologies can be used there. So multidisciplinary, including sales and marketing, and everybody else gets involved and has some value in that onboarding process, which I think right now is, ripe for disruption. So I'm kind of focusing at that point for some of my clients.
So that's kind of you're building in like a realistic job preview into the pre-employment sort of assessment process. Is that kind of?
That's probably the simplest way to put it. Yeah, I guess.
And I think, like, if I think about the way that like assessment centres and that sort of thing are typically conducted, a lot of the time they really aren't a reflection of the actual work that somebody would be doing in an organisation. Like, you throw a group of people in and you give them a task, and
they don't have to build like paper towers out of newspaper in like 10 minutes. I
know that we do that here, but shh.
It's an awesome job. You should see how big our straw towers are.
Oh, they're you wouldn't believe. Yeah. So I've often thought that that assessment centre approach really, and I mean, for obviously there's a third party there that's doing the assessment centre, so it's in their best interest for that to be just sort of the same thing that they do consistently regardless of who's coming through. But as a purchaser of that assessment centre, being the person who's actually wanting a good evaluation of who's going to be able to perform in the role and be a good fit for the role, you would want that assessment centre to actually be tailored around, what does this job actually look like for these people that we're assessing, and can we actually get a good prediction of where we're going to get somebody who's able to perform and who's happy in that role.
Yeah. So it's pretty simple stuff, but from my exposure recently to what is currently happening, it's appalling what's going on out there. It's actually unethical and frustrating, and there's so much money being thrown at the wrong issue. So I think there's significant opportunity to disrupt that space, or at least try and be a little bit more creative in the way that we treat people in that first component of the way they're exposed to work. So, there's some like Josh Bryant at Mitchell Services does 360 video preview underground for underground mining. And Barminco here in Perth have a simulation centre where they bring people through and put them in a physical representation of an underground mine and put smoke in there and basically get them to do an emergency. And there's people that will self-assess whether or not that's the environment they want to be working in. So I think there is some credibility there, but there's a lot more to it, kind of threading that through the way that the whole organisation behaves around how they treat their people. So there's a lot there because there's a massive move to, particularly in the musculoskeletal risk space, for people to wear sensors and to feel like that's going to, provide an understanding of risk. And I'm trying to understand whether that's actually the case and what we can and can't do from a work design perspective, and use these tools for work design change rather than individual bits and pieces. So I'm trying to understand that and get deeper into that space. So again, we'll be sharing my learnings, and now that I'm out on my own, I can do those things. I can share the stuff, which is great. So I feel like there's real opportunity to try and do things creatively, and there's a lot of places. So the two key areas that are wicked problems that I'm interested in trying to do my part to solve are musculoskeletal risk and the interaction of that with psychosocial risk. And they're almost more kind of visionary things. So when I qualify a job that I want to do, if I've got one that is to do, some particular thing, and the other is embedded with one of those two key things, I might choose to do that over the others. But the other space is critical risk. I'm doing a lot of work on critical risk management and doing a lot of data, real-time data discussion on critical risk. So I'm fed up with the bow tie, let's define what a critical risk is, and that's as far as people are going and thinking they're managing critical risk. Organisations that are wanting to legitimately shift the dial on critical risk, those sort of working at heights, explosions, confined spaces, road transport, forklift interaction, all of those things, I'm really engaged in doing some interesting stuff there. And then in the but really keen to kind of help organisations work on that musculoskeletal and psychosocial risk work design challenge, which is, super complex and highly contextualized and needs to be, very contextualized to the business. So it's that high effort, a lot of discovery, a lot of like really complex questioning and difficult conversations. And, it's the hard work. There's some repeatable, simple, easy stuff, but that's the harder work. And that does interest me a lot.
Are you seeing any feeding of the psychosocial work into the critical risk work?
I am, but I don't think there is a lot. So, Yeah, I mean, even something as what should be quite simple to understand, things like even just alarm management, alarm cognitive overload. Thinking that's a risk control, and just not realizing how crazy that is. But also more holistically looking at some of the more process-driven things that are causing challenges from the psych health and safety side around change conflict, so system-based change conflict. So people trying to say, well, this doesn't make any sense. You've just asked me to do this thing, but now this thing's happening. And if you look at a traditional critical risk, it's very linear. There's nothing kind of that threads all of those together. So multiple dependencies on critical risk. Also things like, how dare you ask a frontline worker a system-based critical risk control when they have no influence over that? Like, shame on you. Don't ask a frontline worker whether the vehicle's maintenance is in accordance with the maintenance plan. Like, stop doing that. That's not helpful for anyone. And when we're looking at things like, the data that gives us understanding of time pressure, of adherence to schedule, of influence of new project coming online, like that influences the ability for those risk controls to be effective. So unfortunately, that requires this helicopter, high-level systems-based thinking that, generally speaking, the folks in the organisation can't typically do, just because of the way that they have to be quite siloed into what their lane is. So this is where the consulting side comes into play quite nicely, where you can have that person who isn't under pressure of the business to be able to go, these are all the things that are linking together and how they're impacting the way that people perform, and the way that the system performs.
Yeah, and you'd need to be sort of doing a combination of micro and macro analysis there, right? Like, because you're looking at trade-off decisions at a micro level from a critical risk perspective, but then looking at it, like zooming right out from a sort of systems thinking perspective as well. So, yeah, I would imagine that's a fairly complex thing to be grappling with.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, if, for example, like if you look at something like concrete pumping in construction, the concrete goes off in the concrete pump line when the duration of getting the concrete from the mixing plant to the construction site takes too long. And generally speaking, in somewhere like a Sydney construction site, that route is managed by council decisions that were made fundamentally independent of the subcontractor and the client, but is the most influencing factor on the critical control for concrete pumping. And you have to move it. The subcontractor is got no control over that, and you have to come right out to be able to go, can you even see the link between these things? People that are on the end of that concrete pump aren't going to be thinking of that. The people that are thinking about the route for making sure it doesn't disrupt, school traffic in the morning is not going to be looking at the impact on a concrete pump. So yeah, you've got to go macro and micro, and that's the fun part. That's the where the trying to get a balance and trying to get a way forward. That's the best part. It's the fun part. To try and get really creative problem solving for complex and seemingly impossible challenges. That's what I thrive on, and that's what makes me do what I do.
And I suppose it also may be a little bit threatening, I guess, to those organisational hierarchies that really rely on that narrative of systems and controls. And I guess when you're taking that alternative approach of actually saying, well, let's look at this from a systems perspective and let's look at these different interactions, it kind of it's almost like the emperor has no clothes kind of situation when you then come back and turn that back on these management systems that have been built on this concept that you can actually control these things.
Yeah, look, I mean, I've been in the role, so I've got the empathy to know. So in terms of being able to, like, what is the actionable steps that are taken? They are tactical, they are achievable, but I think there is a need to be for the organisation to have a couple of light bulb moments that they might not have seen, or there might be some trusted folks within the business that need to start shifting or changing the maturity of the conversation or the direction of the conversation. What gets fed up to board reporting? What gets, it doesn't, these things don't happen. These are complex challenges that can't be solved quickly necessarily. Some quick wins, yes. But yeah, I think there's, in some organizations and some industry sectors will likely move quicker and be more successful. One of the things I'm trying to get away from is the individual, the individual being the success criteria. So there's a lot of fabulous industry professionals that if they move to the next organization, the organization that they were in will crumble away to being so there has to be some sustainability in the control mitigation. That's the creative part, I think, is trying to figure out how can we scale out the impact.
Yeah, and how can we have systems that are reliable but also adaptive?
Yeah.
Cam, it's been a fascinating conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about movies. We've talked about competitive diving. We've talked about pocket knives and how they're not allowed in certain places or workplaces. But I guess the thing that we both have a shared interest in is around solutioning or helping companies to deal with the wicked problem of psychosocial risk management. So given that this is a podcast that's focused on psych health and safety, one of the questions we like to ask all of our guests is, what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health?
I just hope that it's not a separate thing. It's not just it's considered an integrated, the management or the respect for the role of the human in an organization is just integrated into, let's just make work better. I don't feel that having, compartmentalizing and saying that managing mental health risk needs to be different to just managing risk in general in a business. It just needs to be far more integrated. I want to get to I hope that we get to a point where, good work is what we're striving for, which enables humans to flourish. That's what I hope we do. And it doesn't need to be done as a separate exercise.
Yeah, no, good call. And we do see that, there's a lot of discussion at the moment. Who owns this? Well, everyone owns it. And yeah, like you say, we need that integrated approach. And it's not just about, it's not just about minimizing harm or getting rid of all the potential stresses in a workplace. It's like, what are the opportunities? How can we help people to flourish, as you say, through the design of work? Yeah, no, I love it.
So for listeners who are interested in working in the field of psych health and safety, what words of advice do you have for them?
Well, I guess you're probably already working in it. If you're working
No, not necessarily. We get lots of people who are interested and maybe hoping for an opportunity to do it in their organisation. People thinking about a change of career path, students.
Know how to answer the question. I don't know. I guess the challenge that I throw back to that is that if you're working with humans, you're working with psychological health and safety. So maybe if you want, I don't have a formal kind of, apart from the stuff I did in my master's degree. I don't even know what I consider my role to be in relation to psychological health and safety, but I do consider that if I'm working with humans, I have to consider the way that work impacts the psychosocial risk in the business for them and for the business. So maybe what they should do is just listen to the podcast and maybe go to Flourish DX and have a chat with Joelle and Jason and get advice on how to get started. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Thanks, Cam. Yeah, check's in the mail.
Google. Maybe while you're at it, you could find out the relative size between the hands
T-Rex. Yeah.
That'd be very helpful.
No, that will be going in the show notes for sure. Yeah.
I think if I can extract what I think I'm hearing from you is that actually psych health and safety is everybody's responsibility, and regardless of what you're doing in an organisation, if you're interacting with somebody or if you're having some role over the design of systems that people are working within, you do actually have a role to play in improving psych health and safety.
Yeah, I think everybody's got some touch point in the way that we experience work. We all have a role to influence that experience. So in some roundabout way, whether it's a titled role or not, I think we all have the ability to influence psych health and safety outcomes, some more than others. And yeah, maybe there's a little bit more exploration you can do to determine what that role actually is. But I genuinely believe everybody's got an opportunity, from the conversations you have at the water cooler to the planning of the high risk work task in the confined space. You can be shaping and influencing psych health and safety outcomes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I started off my conference presentation last week like that. I said, who here has replaced all roles in their organisation with robotics and AI? And not a single hand went up. And I'm like, okay, well, this session will be interesting to you or of relevance to you. So if you employ people, need to consider psychosocial factors and human factors. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Awesome, Cam. Well, it's been great to finally get you on. You've been in our network for a long time. And even though you're not a regular listener, we won't hold that against you. You did come on as a guest. That's more important. So really appreciate that. Where can people find out more about your burgeoning business?
LinkedIn's the best space at the moment. My web presence is in design, so let's just connect on LinkedIn. I'm quite responsive, so ping us a message and hopefully we can connect.
Awesome. Thanks, Cam. All right, well, listeners, that brings us to the end of this episode. So remember, we do record these over video with our guests, so you can check out the video version on YouTube. Not that you'd probably want to take in this one again, but maybe you do. Maybe you want to see the actions that Joelle did with the T-Rex arms. I don't know. We also take some of the best clips and put them onto LinkedIn, on the Flourish DX LinkedIn page. And you'll also find, along with Cam, Joelle and I frequent there, probably too much. And so, we are quite responsive over there if you want to continue the conversation over LinkedIn. But that's it for today. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychhealthandsafety.com.